It's not necessary that all have to go through thought process. No. Broadly, there are these two kinds of people on the planet: analytical kind of people and poetic kind of people. These poetic kind of people don't go through thought process. They kind of bypass it. All people have these two quotients in them, and both also can be done parallelly. They are not contradictory. Both also can be done. But presently what is happening is that people are mixing up. Your poetic mind is not rooted in conclusions. It is fluid. It is more fluid. Thought is a rigid entity. It wants things to be like that, like that, like that. Cut. Conclusions, strict logic, and all this. The other side is fluid. It will speak without conclusion. It speak very abstract. So if that side is strong in people, that they will become devotees. You can say, in a way, they bypass their intellect. So such people, because their nature is such, they bypass the intellect, and they are singing and talking many things. It is the thinking mind which can't bypass its intellect. It will look at those people and it will try to imitate them. You can't bypass your intellect by trying to do it. If you try to do bypassing, you will only end up acting stupid. It is same like telling that I will try to be innocent. You can't be. No, once you have become a thinking mind, once you have become that kind of mind which is logical and thinking, dissecting, you can't become innocent. If you try to become innocent, you will only act, it will turn out very ugly. And people deliberately act childlike, you'll feel like vomiting, isn't it? You just because somebody is of that type and their thinking mind is not strong and they are going by their own way, it can't be imitated.
Probably you would end up more confused rather than getting clarity. You will probably end up more confused. I guess.
Yes, so many contradictions will happen. They will, for some time, they will find comfort. Sometime they will try to belong to a herd, belong to a group, all these things. And then they will feel confident. They know where they will go after death, or they know which is the ultimate God. Well, so many things. They will be confident, and then slowly arrogance will come. So many things. This trying to look at a devotee and trying to imitate is the whole problem, because when you try to imitate, basically what is happening is you have just come up with an idea of a God, and you are telling that I will bow down only to God, which means basically one thought is bowing down to another thought. That is all that is happening in believers. If you say I will bow down only to God, nobody else, only God is great, you're just bowing down to yourself. Thought process is bowing down to itself. It is finding superiority complex upon itself. It's really not sensing that there is something more. The person who is hungry really is sensing something more and is going after it. The people who are trying to imitate it, they are just worshipping their own thoughts. They're not worshipping anything else. Do you remember? I very often give this example of this electromagnetic spectrum. That initially, so it's one spectrum, but when the frequency is very low, you can't see it. Radio waves you can't see. And the frequency is a little high, it becomes light, visible light, you can see. And then again, when it becomes fixed, you can't see. Now, I will apply this in two ways. One way is if you apply it subjectively, if you notice when your life intensity goes down too much, you fall asleep, mind becomes non-functional. Mind goes absent when the life intensity is too less. When it is a little intense, you dream. It is a little more intense, you're waking. Similarly, when your life intensity becomes too high, people have aptly called it as mind-blowing, as stunning, as breathtaking. Why they have described like this? When life intensity crosses, presently your life intensity is in some mediocre range, where thought is dominant. When it was too less, thought was dormant, non-functional. And when life intensity became mediocre, in the intermediate range, thought started functioning. If you take the life intensity further, which happens to people momentarily because of many things, maybe because of jumping off a mountain sometime, whatever they do, thrilling things, adventurous things, that when life intensity goes beyond a certain voltage, then also mind halts. And there is a vague and momentary sniff of something more. And that's why they call it as mind-blowing. Because they sense, see, today I know, for all silly things they're telling mind-blowing, mind-blowing. Even if they drink some drink soda, they'll say it is mind-blowing. That's fine. That becomes the corruption of the word. But the word came into use because human beings, they instinctively realized that when life intensity crosses a certain limit, my mind is stunned. It is kind of suspended. But they realized. And another example, if I have to give you, you know the word ecstatic. Ecstatic, it seems, comes from some Greek word which literally means to stand out. So basically, it is actually what they're saying is you're out of your mind. When you're ecstatic, today I know when you say out of your mind, it means craziness. Are you out of your mind? But actually, when people are really crazy, they are not out of their mind. They are much more entangled in the mind. That is a confusion that has happened because you're looking at everything as duality. So when people are much more entangled, they're not actually out of their mind. They're much more in their mind. That's what madness is. Mm. But when people are really ecstatic, in a way, they sense that they're being kind of ripped apart from their mind. They sense they're going out of their mind. That's why such language has come into use. They are mind blown. So the other extreme is also where mind becomes non-functional. In the lower extreme, mind is non-functional. In higher extreme, also it is non-functional. Only in between it is functional. So this is one way of applying that spectrum analogy subjectively. You can look at it objectively also. Objectively means presently you, I don't know if you attended that talk where I was telling that presently we have this usage of animate, inanimate and all that. We have divided the world as living and dead. But it is actually a dummy division because these entities which you are calling as dead are the ones that are keeping you alive. Water, soil, earth, and whatever, air and everything. So it can't be an absolute absence of life, which is becoming alive. So even if you apply some common sense, you can see that life intensity is very low initially, and its intensity is increasing, and then only at some point, it moves and does certain things, and to you then it looks alive. Then you cognize it as life, but it's not that life came into being suddenly. It was there in low intensity, frequency increased, and only when it came to some mediocre intensity, a very vivid thought process happened. And now thought process is doing this blunder. It is considering only itself as alive. Whatever preceded me is dead. That's dumb, actually. So objectively also the same problem is happening. It is not able to grasp life in the lower extreme. It is not able to life beyond itself also. Objectively also the same thing applies. The both extremes of the life spectrum thought can't grasp. Only in between it is grasping and considering that as life. Only basically it is telling only I am alive, everything else is dead. When it is in this condition, no, if it can't acknowledge the fundamental thread which is underlying it itself, if it cannot acknowledge life which precedes it, can it acknowledge life which succeeds it? It is stuck with itself. It is only telling I am alive, I am alive. I know. Even if it believes in God, it is still within the region of thought and it will worship itself only. That's what is happening. Because if you say I will bow down and worship only God, nothing else, only God is ultimate. Everything else I should not bow down to. It is blasphemy if I do it. It is just a trickery of thought. It doesn't want to acknowledge the fundamentality of life process. So I am telling this as a preliminary step because, in everybody that devotional side may not be equally so strong that you might not have come to sense that there is something beyond thought. There is life beyond thought. You might not have come to sense it clearly. That is not being sensed because you are not sensing life preceding you also. So presently thought is just running its own world, calling only itself as alive. And that is why in Indian culture, they never, although they spoke of God, they never told such things that you should bow down only to God. They asked us to bow down and worship everything, isn't it? Yes. They're basically asking us to acknowledge the fundamentality of life process. Bow down to water, bow down to air, space, food and everything. So that thought process will not act as if it is supreme. So if thought process, only if thought process acknowledge life which precedes it, it can go towards acknowledging life that succeeds it, which is after it. Are you following this? Whereas if you say bow down only to God, it won't work. Thought will keep bowing down to itself. That's all will happen. And it will become more and more fat with it. Only thought process will getting fattened with that approach. So that is why in case of these devotees, when you look at them, they have already sensed that there is life process beyond thought process. They have already sensed it. So they are going after it. If you have not sensed it, it is only because thought process is dominant. And the one way of handling it is this. You have to humble it. Because presently it is acting like some supreme thing. Our Vedic literature, Veda, which are one of the oldest records available from mankind. If you look at them, see, first of all, Vedic literature evolved over thousands of years. It was not one person told something or written something. It was documented, added, and it was cross-referenced, and people validated each other. It was something like, today's scientific literature. It grew over a period of time. It built. And if you see how it built, you will see the beginning of it. They were in awe of the magnificence of creation. They never uttered God, blah, blah, anything. They were just in awe of this phenomenon of life. They converted they talked of nature, they personified it. Basically, you can say they were poetic minds. They were not thinking minds, predominantly. So they, all these natural forces, like mainly they started with whatever was sustaining them. The river and the Saraswati river was worshipped very greatly, and that river anyway went away. If you see the initial parts of the Veda, the Saraswati river is given a great importance, much more than Ganga also, because that was the one that was sustaining their civilization. So rivers and rains and all these things, they praised and they sung about it. It is only towards the end of it, end of Rig Veda, which might have taken several centuries to evolve. It is only towards the later parts of Rig Veda that they really start talking of the whole creation as one living entity. That is where the idea, I shouldn't say the idea. That is where they started perceiving that this whole thing is one life process. The whole civilization evolved. The individuals might have done it by themselves in their own life. I'm telling collectively now what the literature shows. For example, towards the end, you see this Purusha Sukta, where they think of the whole creation as one living entity. But even then, it is abstract. They don't really, in the Vedic literature, the Karma Kanda part at least, they don't come to this idea of some Ishvara or God. They really don't come to it. They were really just struck by this magnificent phenomenon that is happening, and they were just melting themselves into it. Only if we do this, only if thought process acknowledges the whole life process that precedes it and the fundamentality of it, the underlying process which is happening, which is much more glorious, which thought can't grasp. Only if it acknowledges that, it can sense that there is life beyond me also. I am not the end. In that path, then the thought will recede. That is the path of devotion. You are not strangling thought aspect. If you see something much more bigger than you, you will recede. When you see a simple example, I used to give this many years ago in Prashanti also. When you look at these discovery documentaries on galaxies and stars and all, when you look at those startling images of those huge galaxies, what is the feeling that is invoked in you? Your mind is stunned because your whole mental drama looks petty in front of this creation. You see, oh my God, I am too insignificant. When you look at all these pictures of these galaxies and all that, it blows you away, and you sense that there is something much more bigger than I am. So I won't go on with this me. You'll all be blown away in those moments. They are actually the moments of devotion. When thought recedes, this is another way of doing it. You either strangle it or you humble it. Somehow your thought process can be made to allow something more than itself to happen. So this is the basis of Indian culture. This is how it evolved collectively. And that is what they try to ingrain in the culture also. Even now, that is what it is. They call us as these Hindu people as cow worshippers. We are actually not cow worshippers. We worship everything. For some reason today, cow has become too much important, too much glorified. Poor thing. But we are worshipping everything. We are not worshipping only cow. A thought dominant person can't understand it. If they see you worshipping a cow or worshipping a tulsi plant or something, what will they say? Oh, this is all nonsense. This is all blind faith. Why are you worshipping a cow? Cow is not God. Cow is not ultimate. It is not about cow being ultimate or the plant being ultimate or that being ultimate or this being ultimate. It is life being ultimate over thought. We don't care. See, if we were holding on to one particular cow and worshipping it, then you can say it's a problem. We are not particular about it. We will worship everything. So it was just a means. It was a very intelligent way of handling the thought process, so that it will allow something more than itself to happen. But I have told you already, but this is not something that happened to me personally. But now I do understand it. What is Meda telling? I think in pagan cultures in other parts of the world, worshipping nature existed. Yes, it existed. When people are very simple, when their thinking mind is not dominant yet, they will naturally worship nature. There is no other way to it. And not simply out of some whim, because their thinking mind is not dominant, they will really sense that earth is alive. It's not a concept for them. Tribal people, whoever we call as tribal people, they may not be intellectual, but they have that intelligence working in them which senses life process is fundamental and more, it is the ultimate. Today, the intellectual mind is doing hundreds of research and this and that. Finally, they are coming up saying Earth is a living organism. What is that called? Gaia hypothesis. GAIA something. I don't know how to pronounce it. There's a hypothesis where many biologists and environmentalists and so many kinds of people came together and they documented many things which shows Earth is behaving like an organism. It looks like that because in many places which things which are happening in the atmosphere, they don't look mechanical. It looks like organism trying to do something. There looks to be some intelligence which is beyond your understanding of chemistry and biology. So they are coming to see the earth itself is alive. But for these intellectual people, still it is a concept. They really don't resonate with earth as Mother Earth, which the tribal man will.